Our next stop in the year 1936, cinema wrestled with both violence and virtue. First, in the Petrified Forest, a lonely desert diner becomes a pressure cooker of desperation and destiny. Humphrey Bogart electrifies the screen as Duke Mantee, a gangster on the run, while Leslie Howard plays a disillusioned intellectual who sees in him the poetry of a dying world. It's fatalism wrapped in dust and gunpowder, a collision between dreamers and drifters at the edge of nowhere. Then, in the story of Louis Pasteur, the battlefield shifts from bullets to biology. Paul Muni delivers an Oscar winning performance as the scientist who challenged ignorance and changed the world of medicine forever. Here, courage isn't criminal, it's intellectual. Two films, 1 year, one asks whether violence defines us, while the other proves that the knowledge can save us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Cinema 100, and this is The Petrified Forest in the story of Louis Pasteur.
On the edge of the American desert lies a forest turned to stone, the Petrified Forest. Grim, silent, mysterious. Here in a lonely desert tavern, fate draws together a strange company. Alan Squire, a vagabond adventurer running away from his past. Gabrielle Maple, a beautiful girl weary of the desert solitude, eager to escape with the first man who comes her way. Bose Hammond, an ex-football hero down on his luck. Paul Chisholm, multimillionaire banker vacationing with his disillusioned young wife, Dorothy. Gramp Maple, a sly old reprobate. And Duke Mantee, vicious leader of a notorious band of gunmen, hiding out after a gang massacre. In a short space of 24 eventful hours, these characters live a lifetime of romance, adventure, terror, and tragedy. It's one of the most unusual stories ever brought to the screen. The Petrified Forest.
The hospitals at Paris are pest houses. There's scarcely a doctor in the city who's not carrying death on his hands and instruments.
Because of microbes, monsieur? Your private menagerie of invisible beasts?
Exactly. They breed in filth. They may start from the gutter of Paris tonight and by tomorrow claim some mother from this very court.
Will and I are back with another double feature, and this time we kind of shoehorned two movies together when we were putting together our double feature list of our 8 movies for the year 1936, Will. And of all the movies that we had, 6 of them felt like they went well together. These are the 2 that we admit we were kind of like, let's see if there's some common ground. With that being said, the 2 movies are The Petrified Forest and The Story of Louis Pasteur. Will, did you find that there was any common ground here? I mean, we can always reach and stretch and kind of make things fit, but did you actually think that there was a natural place here?
Yeah, I mean, they're both pretty politically relevant today. There's a lot of politics in both movies, and I thought that especially the high points in the story of Louis Pasteur is that science versus politics question that's kind of running a through line through the film. So, yeah, I thought in the end, they both are saying a lot about how we kind of treat politics now.
And how we treat intellectuals, or how we define intellectuals. You know what I mean? I found that to be interesting, specifically in the story of Louis Are we going to say Pasteur? How are we going to say this?
Well, I mean, we're Americans, so if we say we can be forgiven maybe for Pasteur.
Let's go Pasteur. I just want to see if we can at least be on the same page when we attempt to pronounce it. Yeah, I to me, what stood out the most in that movie, but specifically in both, I agree, is essentially the definition of intellectuals, intelligence, and how we go about information, and why we seemingly, it's all ego, right? It's all ego attached to this, and it's going to be great to sit down and kind of talk about these 2 films. With that being said, now that we kind of got the common link between them, Will, what was your viewing experience like? Now, no, we're not usually supposed to date ourselves on these podcasts because these don't come out for a while.
Yeah.
But I just kind of want, as a programming note to everybody, we did watch these 2 movies on the same weekend where we sat down and watched a instant classic masterpiece and one battle after another. So coming off of the heels of that, Will, how was your viewing experience when watching The Petrified Forest in the story of Louis Pasteur?
Yeah, so I actually watched the story of Louis Pasteur about 2 weeks ago. Because we had planned on meeting a little earlier than we are here and I got through one and didn't get through the other. So I am going to be relying a little bit on you for the point to point plotting on that film. But as far as the Petrified Forest, I watched that today, and I was thrilled with that movie. I thought that I was a little worried about this one, honestly, because of the 8 films that we kind of drafted. This is the one that we were kind of threw in there because we were like Humphrey Bogart, and we've seen Leslie Howard before, and it ended up being a good choice, I think, because there's a lot going on here, and I thought it was a good film.
So I was a little worried. I was worried initially, like you were. I also was worried maybe the first 10, 15 minutes. I was a little unsure of what, it kind of felt like we were just kind of seeing just a day in the life, and it was just going to be that. I had completely forgotten what the tagline was. And so I was a little worried, but I ultimately think we got there, and it does tend to pick up a little bit with the introduction of Leslie Howard's character, Alan Squire. He plays Alan Squire there, so when he gets introduced into the screen, I think that movie kind of picks up a little bit. The other movie, The Story of Louis Pasteur, I'm such a character-driven guy. That movie was much easier, I thought, from beginning to end. I thought it had a very especially for the first 30 minutes, they did something very smart, which was the pacing to it. They kind of get you right along the way. I think in the first 15, 20 minutes, we're testing sheep. So I thought the pacing was very good with that movie. So I came away very pleasantly surprised and happy on both films. And with that being said, Will, let's talk about the movie that came out first in chronological order, and that is The Petrified Forest. So this will help you out a little bit since you just watched this one. The movie, Will, Petrified Forest, release date February 6th, 1936. Tagline: a waitress, a hobo, and a bank robber get mixed up at a lonely diner in the desert. Directed by Archie Mayo, first time for us on the show. Distributed by Warner Brothers, runtime of 1 hour and 22 minutes. And Will, I'm giving a lot of names here for the billing. I normally don't, but I'm going to give a lot here, and you tell me who you would cross off this list as not worthy. Leslie Howard, Alan Squire. Betty Davis played Gabrielle Maple. Humphrey Bogart played Duke Mantee. Maybe Miss Chisholm didn't really need a name. I won't give hers, but Dick Foran played Bosie Hertzlinger. Then you have one more. I'm sorry. Paul Harvey, who played Mr. Chisholm, and then Charlie Grapewin as Gramp Maple. So maybe you could take off the Chisholms, but I think there's about 5 or 6 names in this cast that are worthy because of the screen time in which they had. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we should take away Mrs. Chisholm, because I think there's something important there too in the scene when you get about 2/3 through the movie there, where Alan Squire is kind of making his big decision about what to do, where she plays kind of a crucial role in him making that decision. So
100%. And that's kind of where I was at in the same thought process. But if any two had to go, it probably would start there. Yeah. So Letterboxd rating, Will, of a 3.7. Rotten Tomatoes score gave it a 94% from the critics and 80% from the audience. That doesn't really shock me all that much. No. 1936 movie, not a lot of people watching it. It felt, and I've said this a couple times on the podcast now, this is one of those movies that felt like maybe the production was not as good as some of the other films that we've seen. And I don't mean like the directing and the shots in which they use, because I actually think for a one setting, for the most part, they did a pretty damn good job. You don't feel the moving and the blocking. I'm not saying that. Just the look of it, the visual aesthetics of it. And maybe we just, we're not getting a re-rendered version of this movie on whatever you watched on. I watched it on Prime. You watched it on Apple, I think. So maybe we're just not seeing that. But to me, it felt like it was a movie made in 1928 with sound. So that's just kind of my only nitpick on the, as far as the technological aspect of it. But
sure,
I gave it a 3.5. That's where I fell. My viewing experience I thought was perfectly fine overall. But Will, where'd you land with it with Letterboxd?
Yeah, so I'm somewhere somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5, because
Oh
there's,
wow.
I'm a writer, right, through and through. So if something's written really well, it's hard for me to like not connect with it, especially when it's as romantic as this movie is, about not just about like Alan Squire and Gabby Maple. It's romantic about life and how you approach it, and that really hits me. So I thought I I'm in complete agreement with you that this movie can't be a 5 star, because I mean you can tell that the clouds are drawn right
Yeah.
on a
A
cloth in
studio
the background,
set. Yeah.
and that is not good because this movie's called The Petrified Forest, and you would think that the landscape in the background would have to be authentic for the title to, and the setting to actually matter. So it can't be a perfect movie. It's probably not a 4.5, so I guess I'm somewhere in that 4 range. Yeah.
Well, you talk about the writing aspect. This is a stage play that was performed by Humphrey Bogart and Leslie Howard, and brought to the screen. To Like I said, I thought it was seamless in the sense of like it felt like a movie. They do take you outside of the diner a few times with the blocking. We get to meet what's the gentleman's name? Bose. He's throwing the football around and he's got the football jersey on, and he's flirting with Miss Maple there. And then we get to see kind of Humphrey Bogart and his crew outside because their car broke down. This is where we kind of get the stick up part with Leslie Howard and the Chisholms there. So they do a very good job with minimal locations, and yet it never felt like you were claustrophobic. You never felt like you didn't know where you're at, but it felt like they utilized all of that space very well.
Yeah.
But because this is meant for theater, the writing needs to be very, very strong. And I thought it was, and from what I understand, Will, they take the adaptation from the stage to the screen pretty damn close. They kept pretty damn close to the adaptation to the original work there. I wrote something down because it was, and you probably won't be able to see it, but yeah, you definitely can't see it. The word is existential, Will.
Oh, yeah.
It felt like one big thought experiment in this diner where everybody is having some sense of existential crisis or a reflection at the very least. Would you agree with that in some weird way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I thought this was probably, other than Modern Times, the first real. I'm trying to think of the right word. They're really concerned with American life after the Great Depression, and every character is kind of going through their own little version of what comes next for them and what the American dream actually means for each of them. And I thought it was really smart in that regard.
Well, okay, so here's what I kind of want to do since you agree, because this could have went sideways if you were like, no, Rob, I didn't pick up on that at all. Let's take a few of these characters and kind of let's just examine what we think they're kind of battling with, okay? I think let's start with Alan Squire, because his seems to be the most obvious in your face that he's having some sense of, crisis might not be the sense of word, but like an existential thought experiment taking place where he is reflecting. He used the word gypsy. I don't know if I don't know if he quite understands or knows what he's in search of, but he knows that it's important to search for it. What were you at with what is his existential thing?
Well, I mean, he failed. So what happens when you fail? I mean, you can keep trying. Sometimes you wander, because I mean, in this film, the wandering that he's doing is physical, but it's also supposed to be metaphysical too. Like he's going through I think crisis is the right word. I mean, he's wandering through a desert. So I think you're right there. But I think that's what he's going through, is that he found failure and he doesn't know what is that next step because he can't get over the hump that is failure. Like I think he said he wrote a book and sold 600 copies, right? So
yeah,
as an artist, like you're doing it because you have to create, but at the same time, that if it's not acknowledged, your creation is overlooked. That's painful. So I think he's looking for that what comes next for me. And what he doesn't know is what comes next, but what he finds is that purpose, is that, well, at least the purpose that he can tell himself
Yeah.
is there for him. So
Yeah, and we'll debate that a little bit, whether or not that purpose is selfless or selfish. And we'll talk about that when we get to the part in the movie. What do you think about Gramp Maple? Now, my idea of this guy is a guy who clearly okay. I want to know your interpretation of that character. Are you picking up that he's a liar and he's not really lived all these things in what he claims to live? Because he does tell a good story with everything he does. Like there is that sense of like, maybe there's some credibility here. Maybe he did know, Mark Twain and all these people that came with. Maybe he did hang out with these guys in West Virginia and whatnot. Or maybe he's full of shit. And if he's full of shit, Will, then he's a guy that never really left that diner. He's really never he never really seen the world and taken it on the way in which he wishes he has in the stories in which he tells. What was your interpretation of Gramp Maple's character?
Yeah, so I think he's supposed to be like the result of the pioneer, right? They say pioneer a couple times in this film. Like he's a pioneer because he went west and established something. And I think what's interesting about what this film is kind of saying is like, here is what this American dream looks like. And this is what the realization of it is. Like this guy was a pioneer, but he has a diner in a desert that sees 5 people a day. So like, I think it's being a little critical with this character about, what that pioneering spirit actually brought to us. And Gramp has to tell some lies in order to kind of feel like his life had some sort of purpose or meaning. So I don't necessarily look down on him for having these big stories. I think that maybe he read a newspaper article, right, and kind of interpreted it and put himself into it. So, I think that's kind of what his background is.
Yeah, because, I mean, hell, everybody thinks he probably shot Billy the Kid, too, or got shot by him. He's like, no, never. And then he tells something about how he was in that story somehow. I agree with all that assessment of him. It's funny how you talk about the American dream, and yet these people find themselves in this diner in this middle of this desert. So there is this greater message being said there. With Gramp's character specifically, it's important that he works at this diner because he has these new cast of characters that come in the door every single day that are willing to listen to his stories. But the people that are there every single day are the ones that are kind of brushing it off, right? So that's a fascinating thing in its own. Let's go one more. Let's talk about Duke Mantee. Okay, because his might have been the hardest to see that he was going through an existential crisis, or maybe it's not. I mean, here's a guy that's waiting on a woman to show up, and he refuses to leave, even though everybody around him is saying we need to get out of here. What did you interpret if, indeed, this is one big therapy session in this diner? What is the thing he's struggling with?
Well, I think, I don't know if he's struggling with something or if this is kind of the biggest leap that the writers are taking in saying, like, people like Duke Mantee are driven to something because they don't have any opportunities. At some point he talks about being in and out of prison his entire life. Yeah. And like, what options does he have if that's the life that he's lived? Maybe he's made some bad choices along the way, but the question for him is, what is my opportunity? What do I do in order to succeed? And he's, of course, kind of the result here is that he's a robber, a bank robber, and now a killer. So I think here, I don't know if the writers are actually saying this, but it's kind of what I'm feeling is he doesn't have the ability to think beyond those next few seconds because he's never had the opportunity to sit back and say, what should I do with my life? So.
Yeah, and he can't because he's in survival mode. And when you live that life, everything is, there's levels of paranoia and everything that comes with it. You're in survival mode all the time. It's all about reaction. You can plan your escape, plan your getaway, but you're really just planning like the next move. And there's not really, it's not chess, it's checkers with him. And he's trying to figure out how to escape this situation to get to the next situation. I just thought that was a fun little thought experiment game that we could have done there because I was totally picking up on that word existential there. Will, of all the cast, who stood out to you?
I think Leslie Howard was amazing here. I think
Totally agree.
yeah, I think at the 1936 Will and Rob Oscars, I'm going to have a hard time choosing the lead actor because we've seen some great performances so far. I mean, 3 for 3 as far as the movies we've talked about. So him, and then I think Betty Davis was pretty awesome here. I think she had some really good moments. I think that she had a couple of spots where could have done a little bit more, but I still think that she was really good here.
I think she got better as it went on, as though I think everybody else got better as the movie went on.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. So I went 1, 2, 3. Leslie Howard, Betty Davis, Humphrey Bogart was the third one. I was a little, I'm going to say, underwhelmed by Humphrey Bogart's performance, but not in the sense of like anything bad. Like, I didn't think his performance was bad. I just, again, I'm in that, I get in these Fred Astaire, I get in these weird things where I'm like, oh, Humphrey Bogart. Never seen Casablanca. This guy's got to be the guy in this movie, right? And even people like Sean Penn can be, outworked by a 20-some-year-old up-and-coming actress. Not necessarily outworked, just maybe outshined a little bit just because of the character and the stuff given to them. So, I thought that was fun to do that. So yeah, the cast here, Will, I went 1, 2, 3. I think maybe you probably did as well. Yeah. Let's do a little modern day recast if we can. Now I'm going to give away one of my doppelgangers here. And for some reason I had a lot in this movie, but I went ahead and I casted Will, the 3, Alan Squire, Duke Mantee, and Gabrielle Maple. I went ahead and casted those 3. My doppelganger though was Leslie Howard to me. The guy that played Alan Squire looked identical to Tom Hiddleston from Life of Chuck this year.
Okay. Yeah.
Dude. Total. And I was like, not only did he look identical, I was like, this is kind of Life of Chuck's, Tom Hiddleston's performance in Life of Chuck a little bit. Did you see that movie?
I haven't seen it yet, no.
Okay. You talk about a guy who... existential, maybe not because of the way in which they play with the narrative timeline in that movie, but like there's a little bit of that going on. Dude, I went with him, Tom Hiddleston, for that because I couldn't see anybody else in the role now.
That's good.
Did you cast the same 3 characters or did you go a little deeper?
I just did 2, actually.
Okay.
I didn't do Duke Mantee.
Okay. I went with Duke Mantee just because it was Humphrey Bogart's role, so I thought I had to. I went with Tom Hardy. Thought he'd kind of play a little fun, gangster there who's just kind of like, he can do that. It'd be an easy cast. You wouldn't be going too hard there. But then I went Amanda Seyfried for Gabrielle Maple. I thought she would be kind of a fun because she's a little older now, but yet still kind of has that like sweet girlish innocence that kind of like Heather Graham had in the 90s. So Seyfried feels like that feel to me. So that's where I went with those 3 casts. What about you?
So I went with, for Alan Squire, I went with Daniel Kaluuya.
Remind me, I know the name. Who is that?
Get Out.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay.
So he's had some performances over the years that is just very like, I feel like he could give some of these speeches that Alan Squire is giving and just like totally convince you that, we should just do whatever this guy says. And for Gabby, I went with Amelia Jones.
Okay.
I don't know if you have been watching Task or not on HBO.
I'm going to. I want him to get about 5 or 6 episodes in.
Her performance is out of this world in that show. And I can see the dreaminess of Gabby's character. I can just see her in this role. So I and the age difference, you got someone in their 20s, someone in their 30s. I thought it would work perfect for this film.
What is she now? Amelia Jones, I've only seen her because of the press tour that they've been doing with Task and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What is she known for? What is her other roles? Or is she relatively new on the scene?
She was in Coda. So
Coda. Yep. Okay.
Film from a couple years ago that won. She was the main character in that.
Right. Yep. And that won Best Picture. Was she the daughter? Was she the translator? Or was she one of the friends? Okay. Yep. I thought so.
Yep.
Yeah, she did great in that movie. So I can't wait to watch Task because that's definitely on the docket here.
Yeah.
I know I love both those. That's a good one. That's outside the box thinking there. I could see him giving those speeches.
trying to go with names I haven't said before.
It gets kind of hard though, but imagine being an actual casting director,
Right.
Let's talk about Archie Mayo, Will. And what about the career retrospective? A little different here. Rather than just reading a big bunch of paragraphs, I kind of going to do it in more of a bullet point way of doing this. Archie Mayo, Will, let's give you an idea of who he was. Began directing in the silent era around 1917. Transitioned successfully into talkies, working steadily through the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Will, he retired in 1946. So his career spans about 30 years here. So he's got a good decade plus a few years in the talkies or in the silent era. And then he gets about 20 to 30 years here in the, or 20 years in the talkies here. So known most of his career as a Warner Brothers director. He was a contract director. So basically he was hired by the studio, Will, to direct whatever movies they wanted him to direct.
Yeah.
Didn't have a lot of say necessarily in what movies came his way. Known for his versatility across genres, gangster films, dramas, comedies, and musicals. And I say that only for the fact that a lot of the films in which he did were not stuck to one genre. 1929, he did a movie called Is Everybody Happy? And this was his first sound film that he ever had starring a guy named Ted Lewis. In 1936, he made a movie, Will, known as The Petrified Forest. And this is his best known work. So we did get to see Archie Mayo's best work. Makes me question whether or not we'll come back to him.
Yeah.
But never know, right? So, he did work with Humphrey Bogart again in 1937. And then also again with Leslie Howard and Betty Davis in 1937 with another movie called It's Love, I'm After. So, just a studio workhorse type of guy. Seems like a well-respected guy. And I felt like this was a better way to do this to kind of get us an idea of who Archie Mayo is as a person. Maybe you'll take something away from that. So let's get to some anecdotes, Will. Or anything about Archie Mayo that stood out to you within the movie.
It's hard with this one because I do feel like he was limited to essentially like a stage director in this film more than like a film director because there's so much happening inside the diner that you're really more reliant on the characters and the writing. So here, I think he did a very good job of getting everything right, but it wasn't a big, he didn't have a lot on his plate, I don't think, in this movie.
I agree with that. I concur. I do. I always think it's interesting though. Like I do give the credit to the blocking and just the fact that it's in one location for 80% of the film and how it, it doesn't bother you. That I do give the credit there to the director and just how to make that work. It's a dance. It's a dance and it could go wrong if you don't do it the right way. It could be a very stale and stiff performance. So They did a good job. Some of the anecdotes here. Will, Humphrey Bogart was not the first choice here. Warner Brothers wanted a gentleman named Edward G. Robinson, but Leslie Howard, who was already more established at the time, Will, did not want anybody else other than Humphrey Bogart because Humphrey Bogart was the one doing this on the stage already. So he refused to be in the movie unless they took him as a tag team. So that is where Humphrey Bogart, just interesting that Leslie Howard at this point in time is a bigger star than Humphrey Bogart. But I think when it's all said and done, here we are 70 years later, and I think you've heard of Humphrey Bogart. Did you ever hear of Leslie Howard before?
No, not before we started doing this.
No, but...
Well, also, he dies early. I think he dies when he's 50.
I think you're right.
Whenever someone dies young and they still had some, time left, if they had more time, you wonder what could have happened because he's got some good performances. We saw him in one other film. It was with Norma Shear.
Cooper, wasn't it?
I thought it was with Norma Shear.
I thought he was
no.
I'm not sure.
Joan Crawford. It was we watched two movies, Free Soul.
Oh, and then Possessed.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two. With gotcha. Okay. Thanks. Anyways, Clarence Brown, I believe, directed those. So yeah, that was the two there. Yeah, let's move on to the next anecdote if we can. Bogart's gratitude. He had was so thankful to see Leslie Howard that he named his daughter Leslie Bogart in his honor, because of what happened on that and the friendship in which they crafted over the years. So that was kind of a fun little nod. I know you love
Yeah.
me, Will, but I didn't. Your first son's not named Robert, so we'll just leave that there. It is what it is. But
Okay.
just joking. Critics recognized Bogart immediately. While Leslie Howard and Betty Davis were already stars, many critics singled out Bogart's performance as Duke Mantee. Variety called him a menace of the first order. Audiences remembered him more than almost anyone else in the cast, making this the start of his rise of Warner Brothers. I want to ask this question because we've kind of already talked about it a little bit in casting. Did you feel his performance here? Was this was nothing that stood out to me in like an overly, like a sense of accomplishment. I felt he was fine. He was serviceable. I thought I like him there's some parts where I like him a little more than others. But like everybody seemingly is going nuts at this time about this man.
Yeah.
What do you think it's about? What do you give this to?
He definitely. So I think it's a little outdated, his performance, because there were a couple times he stood up and it was almost like he was leaning forward and he was being menacing, right? And
Yeah.
I think it was outdated. So I think for now it was almost like kind of under your breath laugh a little bit at the poses he was taking there. But there are some moments where especially there's a scene where the door behind him opens and he turns around and like pulls that gun so quick
Yeah.
where it looks authentic.
Yep.
And I think you start adding some of those smaller things up, the smaller ticks and the small, like when because he's not dumb in this movie. He's not just some dumb gangster. He's very well spoken. I think you start adding up all those little things and I can understand why someone might see, a future movie star here.
Okay. I mean, I'm on board with it. And clearly they knew what they were talking about because he ends up becoming this future movie star. I just, I'm just questioning the credibility of the 1930s audience right now because, Gary Cooper was pushed on us early, but he got there. So it's like there's something I'm missing where I genuinely tout myself on being able to like a Chase Infinity. Like I know everybody's saying that, but like we've seen her in Presumed Innocence and we're like, dude, this girl kind of stands out. Shia LaBeouf, he was doing Holes, and I'm like, there's something deeper here. You know what I mean? There's things to these characters or to these actors. He's in a hole. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but you get my point though, is that I kind of tout myself on that, and here we are. I'm kind of a little, I don't want to say let down, but like just to the aura that they have. Sure. But we'll get there. And Cooper is on his way of getting there. So we'll get there. That's all I have, Will, for anecdotes on this. I kind of want to do this. What is the message to this movie? Let's talk the plot a little bit. We won't go scene by scene here. Let's talk plot before we jump over to our second movie and then start doing a little comparing and contrasting.
Yep. Well, I think here there's a lot of questions about what the American experiment is really about. I think that they don't do a great job at answering the questions that they're posing. I think they pose a lot of good questions that maybe they didn't have time to answer, or maybe the studio's not necessarily interested in answering. But it is concerned with, like, look at all these people in a diner who are different, but they're in the same place now. And how did they get here? What drove them here? And everyone's got a different story, but they're all in the same place. So I do think there is something deeper going on here that maybe the stage play does a little bit better job of really getting into the nuance of these questions. But I think the theme is just what are we really doing right now here in America, and what's going to happen from here? And I think that's an important question for art to ask is, where art is born from, what is good about this place and what is bad, and what can we fix and what can we repair. And I think that movie's trying to at least get us on the right track of answering some or asking the questions to begin with.
Yeah, and I think this movie does a really fascinating job with how many people are in that diner at the end there. 10? 10 roughly, a little more, a little less. Does a really good job of giving us a snapshot of society at that time, right? Like they have a couple, almost to a point where when the couple, the black guys that come on, they're one is a servant and the other one is the driver, and the driver seemingly has more freedom than the servant driver. They're both drivers, but you get my point. One is clearly obedient. The other one is obedient, but it's more like the Samuel L. Jackson in Django, where that's kind of what I took away from it when he's talking to the other brothers, you know, like why are you doing what you're doing type thing. I thought that was fascinating, kind of a snapshot. I thought the way they used the chisels was fascinating, because there's clearly class warfare there. You know what I mean? You have the haves and the have-nots, and yet somehow you're right. They've all managed. How can the have-nots find themselves in this diner? And Mrs. Chisholm is like, you coward of a man. Like, how can you not figure out a way to solve this problem and save? You know what I mean? Her character a little bit reminded me of Sandra Bullock from the movie Chase. Or not Chase. Not Chase. Crash.
Oh. Yep.
So a sense of entitlement. I shouldn't be here. You know what I mean? So they just did a really good job in a snapshot, giving us what I thought were realistic characters in the American society in 1930.
Yeah, and there's another really good point. You bring up the Chisholms. Like, there's also tension there between the two of them. And like Mr. Chisholm thinks that the money's just going to solve the problem. Hey, I've got $200. Just take that and let us get out of here. And
leave your wallet.
Yeah, go ahead and leave your wallet and sit your ass back down. Like, I just think that's really it is really interesting to put all these people in one place and kind of see how power can shift based on, you know, who's really in control. You know, you think of Tom Hardy in Bane when he puts his hand on. Such a great scene. But
I quoted that today. I probably quote that 50 times a year. It's so perfect. It's like, do you feel in charge? You know, it's so perfect. You're right. They also, even the Chisholms, like, there's more. You're right. They should have got billing. I should have listed their names with more confidence. Because their characters are so important. Because there's also the conversation about gender roles at this time. It's done so well, and just because like when we get to the point where all the cast of characters are finally in one place and they start having these conversations, it's about 30 minutes, 25, 30 minutes of what's happening in the movie. It's the big chunk, and I think it's the thing that it's the thing that makes this movie work, but it's what the movie is weighing on these things, this scene working, right? Everything is weighing in on this 30 minutes here. And they do a great job of presenting all these class warfare, racial war or racial conversation and gender roles all in the same 30 minutes without kind of missing a beat and making it feel spoon-fed. I thought they did a really good job.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, well, let's pause there because I want to have an intellectual conversation, because that's what Leslie Howard, and that goes back to the quote when we get to our quick hitters. I want to introduce the other movie first, okay?
Okay.
This movie, The Story of Louis Pasteur, February 22nd, 1936 was the release date. Tagline is the biography of the pioneering French microbiologist who helped revolutionize agriculture and medicine. Directed by William Dieterle. Distributed by Warner Brothers. Runtime 87 minutes. Starring, and I just gave it to Paul Muni. I could have gave his assistant. I could have gave him, and I could have gave Dr. Charbonnet a little bit of, because they seemingly were in this movie. They thread throughout this movie a little better than everybody else, but I just gave it to Paul Muni. And this, I just want to stop real quick. Paul Muni now has done 3 movies on our journey so far. The Fugitive of Chain Gang, Scarface, and this. These are 3 very different performances.
Yeah, absolutely.
kind of like it's gonna be a weird comparison, but just go with me a little bit. So Jim Carrey was like my favorite on-screen movie actor comedian because I always used to make the argument Adam Sandler's great, but he has his cast of friends, right? He always has his characters that he leans on. It's a crutch for him. Jim Carrey just does it himself. Dude, Paul Muni, I feel like every time we list the casting for Paul Muni movies, it's just Paul Muni.
Yeah. And I think the Academy recognizes that because every time he's in a movie, he gets nominated because he's carrying a movie, even movies that, I'm not necessarily a huge fan of. So,
yeah. And that's the thing. It's like this is where I gravitate towards these types of actors because there's just something that's next level with them. And I don't know if it's an obsession of detail, just a understanding the craft or the character or whatever it is. There's just something that they seemingly get a little bit more than the other person or the other actors. I saw Leslie Howard and he was awesome. I saw Paul Muni here and I'm like, wow, you're right. And then Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times. This might be our toughest. I think that's your hot take right there. It's not even a hot take anymore. I think this might be our toughest year when we start talking about our awards at the end of the year. I think I agree with you.
Yeah.
Continuing on, Letterboxd gave this movie Will a 3.4. Now, I gave it a 3.5 as well, but I will say I was close to giving this movie a 4 because I think the pacing does a phenomenal job with otherwise material that could go wrong in anybody else's hands, right? Like this is very stuffy stuff that we're talking about here, a chemist and rabies vaccinations and all, but they did a very good job. I might even land on a 4 by the time it's all said and done because of the performance of Paul Muni. Where are you at?
I gave this a 3.
Okay, so interesting. Biographies, right?
Partly, yes, definitely.
Okay.
It has something to do with it.
There's no pushback to his character at all. They don't recognize, there's a little bit of like doubt, but he's always proven right. And I don't like it when they just kind of make someone look perfect. So that's probably where I'm at in a 3.5. Tell me your reasoning for why it's a 3.
Well, to be completely honest, I might disagree with you on the pacing here. I feel like the pacing was so quick and it was rapid from one period to the next that it made me kind of not necessarily connect with the character very well. I get what you're saying as far as like pushing the film along so you can get through this guy's life and see the things that he did. But to me, it felt like it separated things out a little bit too much so that when I was trying to understand the character of Louis Pasteur, I didn't quite get what they were going for. So for me, the pacing kind of hurt the film a little bit because I wanted to see him in those kind of 3 time periods a little bit more than we were given. Like before he goes to the countryside to, start vaccination on the sheep, and before he goes to start working on the rabies, it felt a little rushed in those transitions. So it kind of made me not connect with the movie quite as much.
And that argument is valid because I think essentially, maybe I'm wrong, maybe the stakes, if we spend a little more time before we get to all of these big, experiments or tests, like the big, finale of all these things in which he's talking about, if we kind of had the stakes feel a little higher, you'd feel a little bit more like if we just had a conversation the night before, which they kind of did pepper in a little bit when they're having, Paul Muni and his wife are in opposite beds, and they're kind of a little bit talking about how worried he is about whether or not his test is going to go his way or not. You wanted more of that, or did you want more backstory that's motivating of why? Like when it slows down, what is it you're asking when you get the slowdown, them to give you more of?
Yeah, and I think maybe it's also a little bit kind of like, especially Dr. Charbonnet, his a little bit of a straw man here right? Like, it just seems like the scientific community is just like something for Louis Pasteur to overcome rather than there being any conversation here. And that just feels a little bit, it feels a little inauthentic. Like, it feels like there would be at least a couple of other voices that are like, on his side. It's almost like building up Louis Pasteur as like the savior. And
Of
that might be part of the issue I'm having.
Okay, I recall a few moments in like the Parliament chamber there when they're all debating, and they're like, "Hey, nobody wants to see this guy's vaccination or hear his theory on anthrax." And then there is some moments where some of these guys do stand up and they're like, "Actually, I do. Actually, I do." So that's important to the film, but you just wanted more of it. No. Hey, teach their own, but I understand it completely. So the thing I thought about this movie's pacing was I thought it was crucial because they had to get through, like they wanted to not, instead of it just being about anthrax and the overcoming of that one thing, they're trying to talk about anthrax and rabies and, how important it was to, to sterilize all things prior to, whether it be dealing with anybody in a surgical field, but with, especially when it comes to mothers and babies and giving them a place that would make them feel safe. I think it was important that they did cover those areas when you're doing an autobiograph or a biographical movie, but maybe they could have just focused on one thing. And then at the end, they hit us with a couple other, how these movies sometimes focus on one area of someone's life. And then they hit you with and by the way, he also is the reason why we, wash our hands before we do any of that. Who did you do? Let's talk. So with the casting portion though, outside, and I know it's been a couple weeks for you, but like outside Paul Muni, which we've already kind of discussed him a little bit. Did anybody in the movie like stand out to you that is worth a second billing? Because they all felt like they were just servicing Paul Muni's character. And that kind of goes to the way the movie was depicted to you. It kind of feels like it's Muni versus everyone, right? So like that kind of goes to your point.
Yeah. And I think the closest we get is the Dr. Martell, right? One who ends up marrying the daughter. I think he's probably the closest we get to like someone having a revelation, right? And like understanding like where they were wrong and why Pasteur is right. So he's probably the next most important character. And then Dr. Charbonnet is important to the story. But there's just so many little things that just kind of bug me about the choices that I think you're right. We just Paul Muni and everyone else.
And that just seems to be the theme when it comes to Paul Muni movies. It makes me starve though. Like when we get to a year, Will, where we see like Paul Muni, Leslie Howard, Paul Muni, Clark Gable, when we get to a year where we see that, I don't care if the movie's a 3.2 on Letterboxd. I think it's something that needs to be discussed because I would be willing to watch a movie that has a power duo to see who wins that boxing battle. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yep. That makes sense.
Let's talk modern day recast. Did you have anybody that you think can live up to the chops of a Paul Muni?
The first person I always think about able to carry a movie like this is Robert Downey Jr.
Ooh, okay.
He just has a authority in his acting that he could lay down the law, right? And everyone could just he could shine, and we didn't need anybody else. So he was the first one I thought of. If we were going for someone a little younger, that's a little tougher. I couldn't really come up with anything.
Well, let's do a quick Google search real quick. I'm just curious as to how old Paul Muni was in this movie. How old was Paul Muni in 1936? So let's see. He was 40 years old. So, you go
right.
a little, you go a little younger, you're really recasting him to someone else altogether. I spent a lot of time on the other one, so I didn't spend enough time on this one probably when it came to the casting. I went with Jake Gyllenhaal because my man looked good in a beard. I was like, you know what? Who's an actor that looks good in a beard? Paul Muni. He looked good in a beard. He really, really, we've seen him clean cut in Scarface, and then we've seen him in The Fugitive with a chain gang, and now we see him here with a beard. I like the way Jake Gyllenhaal looks good in a beard, Will. So,
Sure.
and you're a guy that looks good in a beard as well. So, you guys are in the beard club. Let's talk William Dieterle. Early career in Germany, began as an actor in German silent films, Will, under directors like F.W. Murnau and Fritz Lang, a couple guys that we know and love on this podcast. Transitioned into directing in Germany during the late 1920s. So earlier we had Archie Mayo at the end of the 1917, 1918 era. Here we have early 20s. After spending time with Fritz Lang and F.W. Murnau, we get William Dieterle here. He immigrated to Hollywood in 1930 to escape the rise of Nazism. Quickly found steady work at Warner Brothers as a contract director. So Warner Brothers, man, I'd like to do some research on this, and maybe we will when we get to 1940. We'll reset everything and talk about where the studios are really at and who the big three, big five are, because I'd like to get a better understanding of studio heads at this time. But again, they hired this guy as a contract director, became known for his efficiency, visual style, and handling literally or historical material. He went on, Will, to win Best Picture. He had the Best Picture Oscar winner for The Life of Emile Zola in 1937. So probably a film that will be on our docket to discuss next year. So where are you at with the direction in William Dieterle for this particular piece of art?
Yeah. So I almost want to punt on this because I don't know the version you watched, but it was in standard definition and it just looked terrible. So it was really hard to kind of look past that and kind of I was trying to think of it on terms of what this might have looked like, 90 years ago. So I think overall my biggest complaint about the film is that it just feels like a train is moving too quickly through the station and I couldn't jump on. So I think that probably falls on the director a little bit. As far as like finding the spaces for Paul Muni to do his thing, I thought there was some really great stuff going on there, especially when you kind of get to the moments of doubt in the rabies. He lets Paul Muni do his, like, he finds the staging for him. He lets him, walk back and forth through that giant laboratory that he's working in, and does a good job of kind of tracking everything. So as far as like the little things like that, I think he does a pretty good job of giving the stage to Muni.
Yeah, definitely. He's one of those directors that felt like, hey, I have someone who can cook here, so let's just get out of the way and kind of give him the space to let him do his thing. Sometimes maybe people smarter than me or critics that have been doing this a lot longer can analyze a movie and maybe can sense scenes where like there's friction between an actor and a director. Like a lot of people are talking about the documentary that's coming out here on Megalopolis and how the documentary is way more fascinating than the actual movie. And they're saying that if you watch the documentary and see all the like friction, specifically with Shia LaBeouf and Francis Ford Coppola and what Shia LaBeouf was trying to understand about his character and what he thought would bring more to the scene, and Francis just telling him basically to shut up and just do the scene as is. Watching that little clip that I seen, Will, is fascinating. Now it makes you want to go back and watch the movie and see if you can pick up on any of that. I'm sure you don't, because they're all professionals at the end of the day, but like maybe you do. And have you ever sensed that in any movies that you've ever watched?
Not off the top of my head. Usually I am pretty good at kind of closing off the rest of the world when I'm in a movie and just trying to experience what is happening in the movie. I mean, who in their right mind would go,
Oh, he seems off there. I bet he's mad at the director, right? So it's kind of a question that don't make sense. But I was just curious in hindsight, like if you've ever watched something back and been like, oh yeah, I can see it now. You know what I mean? But it would only work in hindsight because I don't think anybody would be able to anticipate that as they're watching it. So
Yeah.
let's talk about some anecdotes for the movie itself. Paul Muni's obsession with accuracy. And this, Will, is the Daniel Day-Lewis effect, right? It is the whether or not it's method acting and that'd be kind of something that we need to research a little bit when that got started and who took that to what level. But it says Paul Muni, who played Pasteur, was famous for disappearing into his roles. For this film, he spent weeks studying medical texts and photographs of Pasteur. He even learned how to hold test tubes and scalpels like real scientists, so his lab scenes would feel authentic. Warner Brothers joked that Muni could pass as a Parisian doctor if acting didn't work out. This just lends more credibility to what we've already discussed in this film, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a lineage here Paul Muni kind of lives in, because you can see that method of his acting, just the way he embodies the character.
What do you think? I want to ask this while we're on him because we could do 20 minutes just on Paul Muni, but like, what is the thing? I'm going to ask you two questions. One, what is the thing that makes Paul Muni stand out to you amongst his contemporaries of this time that we've watched? And what is your favorite quality that he brings to his characters, or maybe just specifically to the Louis Pasteur character that you do like, that makes his performance feel authentic or something different to you?
Yeah, so the parts where he is having conversations with other doctors, and he does this thing where he almost like stiffens up, like he's ready for a fight.
Yes.
And like the way he kind of positions himself is almost like a boxer when he's having these conversations with especially Dr. Charbonnet, where he's always facing up to him. It's just, he has a confrontation about him that makes it feel authentic, that makes it feel lived in. And I don't know if it's like, I'm trying to remember if this kind of is a through line through all three movies that we've seen from him, but definitely here, he just has a very like stoic, doctorly presence that he is able to embody. So here, I think it's just his ability to make himself appear like a doctor.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? Like, and I think to answer like the other question about amongst his contemporaries is the authenticity that you feel within him. Like, this is one of the things that watching in these movies along the way, in watching one battle after another, we still live in a time where authentic acting stands out still.
Yeah.
And maybe even more so because there's so much stuff now, so many different platforms, so much oversaturation of movies and TV shows. And it feels like I don't know how you feel about this, but this is kind of where I'm at. And this is where I've discussed this briefly on like the Timothée Chalamets of the world and whatnot. Like them. I like Timothée Chalamet. So again, I'm not harping on him, but where I'm at is I feel like there is an abundance of content. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That still lacks the substance of what you're looking for. And I feel like that is greater now than it has been in a very long time. And in 1936, it feels like they're learning what substance is. And some guys got there a little quicker than maybe others, and where a Paul Muni could excel in this craft where majority of the people haven't. They haven't learned it yet. Now it's like there. Like everybody has the tools now to acquire. Maybe they have the tools to maybe potentially tap into their authentic selves, but that doesn't mean that they're ever going to be able to. Make sense of my rambling here.
I think you said the very first word you said was content. That's what things are now. I mean, even in the 30s, like some of that stuff is analogous to like what's going on in the 30s and what's going on today. But then there's entertainment that you could go seek out. Content is about inundating people with stuff in order to have them always be entertained.
Yes.
So I think what's happened now is that a film like One Battle After Another is just another piece of content that is the same thing or in the same plane as going to YouTube and watching shorts or going to TikTok and watching shorts. We have equivocated all forms of art into content, so we've devalued all of the art, is at least in movies. So I think what's happened today is like One Battle After Another is special because it kind of feels separate from all the commodification of content, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what it's all about. It
Yeah.
feels like it exists somewhere else. And when a movie or a TV show kind of transcends and gets outside of that box, it feels different. So I'm trying to remember where you kind of started here because I got off on a tangent. But yeah, I think the main difference here is like when Paul Muni is inhabiting this character, it transcends what is a typical piece of entertainment. It's an art form what he's doing.
Yeah, it is an art form, and it's one of those things that like I just haven't explored the thought past a certain point far enough for me to actually come to a conclusion or a statement that is organized and effective, and you know what I mean, that makes sense when it rolls off the tongue and I say, hey, look, this is what it is, and it's clearly a message there or some type of theory that I stand by. All I'm trying to get at is, you're right. There's an abundance of content and everything is content now. And we're all fighting for each other's attention, but we're pulled in every different direction at a moment's notice, every 5 seconds, every 3 seconds, every half a second, because that's how fast you can get to the next thing. And the problem is because we're so used to getting it, we're not even giving the people that are spending the quality, we're not giving the quality, the appreciation and the time like we used to, like we should be. And therefore, it is hurting the efforts of people that are even going to make that quality anymore because they're like, hey, it's not getting the residuals that it should be getting. It's not getting the monetary unit to back up. Like, who knows? I haven't seen the box office this weekend, but like, are they going to continue to throw a budget around to these directors and make these types of films like we want when, you know, another guy can go on there and drop whatever, Sharknado, and it's getting more viewers, right? How and then my question would be, it's very hard for me to argue with a studio that would back one and not the other because they're making money. But it sucks for somebody that has a taste for art. So let's do this because art feels a lot like intelligence too. All right, when we're talking about good art. So I want to transition now. We've got both set up now for both movies. I think there is a common theme threaded in here. One of the quotes that stand out to me in the movie Petrified Forest came from Alan Squire, Leslie Howard's character, Will.
Yep.
And he says, and I'm stooging off one of my hard-hitting or quick hitters here, but memorable quotes. Alan Squire, the trouble with me, Gabriel, is I belong to a vanishing race. I'm one of the intellectuals. Gabriel Maples says, that means you've got brains. And Alan Squire says, yes, brains without purpose, noise without sound, shape without substance. So now, there's that portion. Then in the story of Louis Pasteur, there is a literal debate taking place on basically intelligence and new information versus the old world and the old way of doing things. And ego gets in the way, stops this new development simply because it's egotistical, because it's got pride attached to it, doesn't want to be wrong, all of these things. And it just makes me ask this question of like, intelligence there's a lot of parallels with real world right now, but it feels like it's been maybe consistent throughout history. We got one movie here taking place in 1860 in Paris, France. We got another movie that's taking place in early 1900s. Is it just part of human nature for us to just constantly feel like we're rejecting intelligence? Like, what is our fear of accepting intelligence? Because right now it feels like there's a complete rejection of like education. It almost feels like if you try to be educated, or there's a complete and utter rejection of it right now. Why? Not, you don't have to answer today's. Answer my first question.
Well, I really just think it comes down to, like, one of the great debates in philosophy, especially like in 19th century Germany, was like, what we are building all these structures, right, in order to explain things. Like, we've got science, we've got philosophy, we're delving into evolution and like biology and all of these things. We're trying to build up all of these avenues of intelligence, and then Nietzsche comes along and says, none of that shit matters, because all life is the will to power. All it is the strongest person, who is the loudest and the most followed, is the one who gets to impose his will. And like, so intelligence at the end of the day doesn't matter if there's enough people pushing on the levers of power that allow stupidity to win. So if there's enough people that just say intelligence doesn't matter, and we don't care about that, we just want to will our power through this figure, because it always takes a figure. It's rarely collective. It's always, there's collective behind the figure, but you need that cult of personality to kind of push it. So I think what happens is you get enough push on one lever of power, and if the other levers on the other side aren't strong enough to stop that lever from getting flipped, then what you have is a will that comes to fruition, and in our instance is just a bunch of nonsense that doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter because their power is being willed. So for me, it really just comes down to, like, we can build all these foundations and structures and, push on trying to be intelligent and having everyone be educated. And then you have another lever that's just stronger. And it sucks, because what do we do to push back when the problem is they've built their own structures and foundations that don't allow us to actually flip our levers. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with this question.
All right, so let me take your answer then, and I want to ask this question about capacity, okay? So with your answer, what you just gave, I want to talk about it more in a vacuum on an individual level. Just each person on an individual level, okay? Essentially what I'm asking you is the capacity or the potential for intelligence, okay? Mm-hmm. Is intelligence, again, that's a very vague word here, because mechanics are more intelligent at their specific category than maybe they are on professional wrestling, but I'm going to kick their ass in professional wrestling, right? You get what I'm saying? So intelligence is it's a moving thing, all right? Yeah. But so for this conversation, I want to take the word intelligence and let's just apply it to maybe a greater understanding of multiple categories or areas, and even more so a way of approaching and troubleshooting things that might arise in those categories or areas, right? So when I think of intelligence in a human being, I might not understand how to fix cars, but I might be able to identify where problems come from because of trial and error, or utilizing my intelligence towards things, right? So we're on the same page. All right. So let's talk about capacity from an individual level. Why then are not more of us individually reaching that potential or that capacity? Is that even possible? Is it the collective is unfortunately at one level of capacity, and then there's that minority of people who actually ever get to tap into these greater levels of like greater thinking, greater understanding. And I know in a nice way, I'm saying, I don't want to use the word stupid and idiots because I'm not thinking that, but I mean, like, are people that are able to reach that level of troubleshooting and critical thinking towards things, are they fewer and far between? And if that's the case, does everything just feel inevitable? So why do we, like Nietzsche says, why are we Why do we have schools? Why do we try to educate children if they can't get past the capacity?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just we've talked about this a couple of times. I brought up this revolution against counter-revolution. Nietzsche doesn't say that your will to power can't also be expressed, but he says the stronger will survive. So what I think he would say, and kind of how I feel, is like at some point you hope that your willing education, your willing study of critical thinking, your willing of uh, any sort of kind of pushback against the other side, the side that lacks nuance, it's enough that it can push back against and will itself to power. So it's not necessarily hopeless, where I'm coming from. But it does involve enough people being able to push back. And I think we're starting to see like some of the structures on the other side that are being built are to limit our power, right? I mean, specifically it's taking brown people and just saying like, you're not good enough to be an American citizen. So we'll see you later, or we'll lock you up in a detention center long enough to make you want to go back anyway.
And be obedient.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
be obedient. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think the thing that one battle after another, ironically, has kind of instilled back into me is like, we do have avenues in which to push our will back into the world. And, I think, this is maybe a cop out because I've got kids and I can just say I'm doing my best to train the next generation. But I'm actually not doing much myself, but I think that's where it's at. You have to push those buttons, and you have to push on what you can in order to push back, and you hope that it's good enough.
Well, I think it's not a cop out. That's where I'm at. Like these things, unfortunately, like the fight that's being had right now needs to be the fight for education. Like I know, and I got out of it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, there's days where I'm like, man, I took an easier route to money and to the things that I want because I'm like, at some point I'm 38. At some point I want a boat. You know what I mean? So and financially I got to get there. So it's like, okay, these structures that I thought were going to ultimately get me there have done nothing but continue to put me into a more of a financial hole. So it's like you lose trust in those structures. So it makes you have to do other things. If everybody did the noble thing all the time, that would be wonderful. But like, we also need that to kind of, reciprocate our way to make us know that we're doing and making the right choices. But I do think that you being a parent is the number one thing that you're supposed to be doing, because it is the thing that fights back against those types of ideologies. And it's the things that, you know what I mean? That's what you have to do. Unfortunately, those are generational fixes and they take time. But to apply what I'm trying to get to these movies with the story of Louis Pasteur, he's fighting an entire mob of people that have thought one way and they've accepted that. So taking my question, at what point then is he successful he's only successful because they get to see the results of what he was touting, right? You can't just go into a room and say it is this way. And you can, but that only works for so long, right? Mm-hmm. My question is, if Paul Muni's character, if Louis Pasteur, and I don't know if this is a great depiction of who he was as a person, but if Louis Pasteur was a little bit more outspoken, louder, and his results never came, could he have persuaded people to continue to follow him blindly? Is it because of his kind of stoic nature that a guy like him has to be right?
Yeah.
Like, does he have to be right in order to build the following and have people follow him?
Yeah, well, you have to have evidence, right, in order for science to make any changes, right? I think the smartest thing this movie does is position science as a kind of second class citizen in comparison to politics.
100%.
Because if it wasn't for the new leader, I can't remember his name, but Napoleon going away and the new guy coming in, if it wasn't for that change, maybe nothing changes. And I think that's the smartest part about this movie, is that it's saying, like, science is great because it allows us to discover truths and try to better ourselves, as a collective group. And I think that Louis Pasteur is an admirable person. But the question isn't whether science can do that, wholesale, or it can, if it's inevitable, because it's not. What's inevitable is that it needs to have an avenue in order for results to come, and that avenue needs to be allowed by the body politic. And I think that's why, even though the movie kind of didn't hit me in a certain way, I do think it resonates today, because I think it's pretty obvious that science is not a friend of our government right now.
So the first president of France is I forget what his name was, but after Napoleon, right? The first president of France is so crucial to this movie, and he's only in it for 25 seconds, right? And it's the one quote that I have from this, and it's basically, essentially, without reading the whole thing, they're having a discussion on Arbois and how they can make the money from the Prussian War or whatever it was, and their idea is that the sheep there are still living and everybody else are dying because of this anthrax, and they want to figure out what it is. And one of the guys on the administration gives the stereotypical, like, pushback response of, like, there's no way, some of them are just more immune. They're an outlier to this. And he's pushing back saying, well, why don't we go find out? Because what your response was more guesswork. Let's go get the actual, without him saying the word guesswork, without him understanding, like, this is not how you troubleshoot problems. Without that type of leadership there, they never get there.
Yeah.
And it's so crucial, right? So to me, it was very much crucial to the movie. And I thought that it was a great thread of just intelligence and how we perceive it, interpret it, and what the actual definition of it actually is. So with all that being said, Will, what else from both of these movies did you want to discuss, or do you think we kind of hit on both of them?
No, I think we covered the really big points here. And, surprisingly, the two movies we were a little kind of wishy-washy on how to put together ended up being pretty good fits, I think.
I think we can always figure out that, but this was a much better fit than we originally thought, for sure.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to say about Paul Muni before we get into quick hitters is there is professional wrestlers in the 80s and 90s, when they would give promos, they would really have to hype themselves up, and they'd come on the screen and they'd be very loud. And Charles Loudon, I love him, but he can be very loud and in your face, and he can be very what's the word I'm looking for? An extrovert. He can be very, obnoxious on the screen. Then there's a guy in the late 80s, early 90s named Jake the Snake Roberts, and his brilliant, genius way of doing promos was, and he's been on documentaries stating this, is that everybody else was yelling and screaming. I thought it would be effective if I whispered. And that's how Paul Muni's character in this movie feels to me. He's stoic. He's whispering. He's not overly emotional about his responses to any of these guys, almost so that he still has, like, his ethics of how he thinks people that he disagrees with should be treated. So, like, his assistant later in the movie, his son-in-law, ultimately disrespects the person that he's assisting early on, Dr. Charbonnet, and he doesn't even want to hear what he has to say, even though he's agreeing with him because of this. But he does it in such a whisper form, a very calm form, where when he was Scarface, he was the Charles Lawton. He was the eccentric in your face. I think he's a phenomenal actor. And I think it's something that when we get more and more movies behind us, we need to have this discussion of, like, where do these actors, I think Paul Muni could do any movie at any time in any era, right? Yeah. So, like, Paul Muni deserves to be in the pantheon of, like, a Philip Seymour Hoffman to me now. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because we've seen 3. I want to see a couple more, but yeah,
sure.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
tracking.
I just think he's gotten better at every one. All right, let's do quick hitters here.
Right.
Let's talk hard-hitting questions let's do the Petrified Forest here first. Hard-hitting questions, Will. Did you have anything?
Yes. So I wanted to know, what did Mr. and Mrs. Chisholm do after this? Right. I want to know the
They
Petrified
stayed
Forest
together?
feud, the story of the Chisholms. That's really all I had. I just thought that there's a lot of unanswered questions here for those two after this evening.
Dude, 100% they stay together. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
They get back, and they might not love each other, like each other that much, but it's all about image and status. And she's not trying to lose that by any means. He's still got the money. So
Yeah. No, not in Dayton, Ohio. They're definitely staying together.
100%, dude. 100%. I had one. Is the scariest part of this movie realizing you're trapped in Leslie Howard's existential crisis? That's kind of how it felt, and we kind of talked about that a little bit.
What is the John Cusack movie where he's at the diner and all the characters end up being in his head? What is that movie?
Oh, that's not High Fidelity, right? That's a different one?
No. It starts with an I. Not Invincible, Insomnia. Anyway, there's a movie that this definitely reminded me of a little bit. So,
It's John
Cusack.
Diner movie. I'm just going to type in Diner movie. We'll see. This is giving me the sure thing. I'll have to figure it out. Let's continue on. Will, we've got doppelgangers. I had quite a few. So I already told you Alan Squire. He looked like Tom Hiddleston to me. Gramps. Now here's this one. I couldn't believe it when I saw this, but I was like, Will, I don't know if you're even going to remember this guy's face. You ever seen the movie Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story?
Yeah.
Okay. The father of Dewey Cox, wrong kid, died. Raymond J. Barry is his name. I had to look that up.
Oh, man.
He reminded me of Gramps. The whole movie. I was like, that is totally the father from the Dewey Cox story.
Okay.
Also, I had to look this up, but I did think she looked like her. Betty Davis. I thought Natasha McElhone, the lady from the Truman Show that Jim Carrey's in love with.
Yeah.
They just had similar looks to me,
Okay.
like the eyes. I went those three. So what about you?
I didn't have any doppelgangers for this week. Nothing popped in my head. So, and by the way, that movie was called Identity.
Identity. Okay. I have not seen that one.
Oh, man. Well, I gave away the plot. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I'll definitely watch it. So, what about did you have any memorable quotes for Petrified Forest or for the Story of Louis Pasteur?
Yes, we're getting a little long in the tooth, so I won't read the whole thing, but it's when he's talking about when Squire is talking about Gabby. He says, he goes on the French woman's speech, and he says, "Living, I'm worth nothing to her. Dead, I can buy her the tallest cathedrals, golden vineyards, and dancing in the streets." That whole section there, when he's kind of given that, I just thought was perfect.
The speech about whether, I thought it was a little odd that that he kind of pushes back against her love a couple scenes prior when she's already confessed it to him, and she's like, "See." Talking to Bo's like, "See, he wants nothing to do with me. And that's why I entertained walking the night with you." Why did he do that there?
Well,
and then
it could be just, they've got guns to their heads. So he's a little bit on the edge. That could be part of it.
Because it is the heroism. It's funny. Bo's character, unfortunately, this is just like one of those guys that, outside of his kind of pervy nature, handsy nature in the opening scenes, he's a good guy and he tried to save them, but he fumbled it. And, again, now we root for this other guy. And I think it was that kind of thing where he's like, "Oh, wait, this guy tried to do this to impress this woman or save this woman. I've got to do something." And I kind of think that woke him up. So I bought that. I allowed it. So anything from the Story of Louis Pasteur? I thought his speech at the end was really well done, and I thought he delivered it very well. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I liked what he had to say on the way we should approach science and humanity.
Yep, agreed.
Any doppelgangers or hard-hitting questions from the Story of Louis Pasteur?
Yes. I have Phil Donahue written down here. And I'm trying to remember which character, so that shows you two weeks in the
Wait, Phil Donahue from the
talk show.
early the talk
Yeah.
show host.
Yeah. I can't remember the character, so let's just scratch that one.
Okay. Will, Petrified Forest. Should this movie have been drafted in hindsight? And if so, is it a rewatch or a scene study? If not, is it a forget it?
I have it as a rewatch. I really like what's going on with Leslie Howard here, so I think it's something that would be worth watching again.
Let me ask this question. Is a movie that I give a 3.5 to, is that a high enough rating for me to say rewatch? Because here's the thing. I don't think scene study works unless I'm taking 30 minutes of it. So, like, I think in order to understand the scene study, the 30 minutes that I think is important, I think you almost have to watch the whole movie. So, like, I would, too, tout it as a rewatch. But I'm not sure that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, there's plenty of action films and other films I've watched multiple times that are probably not that great.
100%. Okay.
Overall, yeah, so I think you're fine.
Okay. What about the Story of Louis Pasteur?
I have that.
This would be a little harder for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I have it as a scene study because I do think that I really like the early part of this film. And I think that whole kind of leading up to him proving himself right, there's some stuff going on there that I like. So,
okay. Should it have been drafted, though, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think his performance alone.
Okay. It's very hard to get you to say no to that question. So I'm always curious because I've said no a couple times. You're usually more forgiving and think that we should have been doing what we did. So
I don't think this is a bad movie. I just think that there's some problems that hurt it.
100%. Fix it in one move. Give me your fix it in one move for Petrified Forest.
Shoot it in a real location. I really think that changes the game here because then if you have real settings and you have an actual petrified forest that kind of gives that feeling back to the movie that the setting is important, I think that it would do wonders for it. But
so the only thing I wrote down was more of a question, something that I thought we could discuss now was, do we really need the big heroic, like the lovers romantic kiss scene at the end while the doors are being like, you know what I mean? Where everything's going chaos. Like, do we need this to be a romantic movie at the end of this, a romance? Do we even need that category? Can it just be drama, gangster movie? Like, do we need that? It's definitely sprinkled in. You can have you can have their motivations, their character development be rooted in that. Do we need that? Or does that make you go away from the kind of the therapy session that was this existential of all these characters, which could have been a deeper meaning thing to, this is just a movie about, you know what I mean? Like, did we need that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, it is an existential movie, but it's also romantic about what humanity is kind of striving for. And I think here you're losing Alan Squire. Like that's his, that's his goodbye. That's what he wanted to do. So I think it's important.
With that being said, so now my question said, if you were going to answer that way, is this one of the greatest romantic movies of all time because of the way it ends?
I mean, it's not good romance, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to think about that one a little bit more, but
the only reason I brought it up is because it seemingly felt like he wasn't going to get shot, right?
Right.
But I think it was important that he did get shot, and they stuck to the guns on that. So,
yeah.
All right, fix it in one move. The Story of Louis Pasteur. Yours is a pacing thing. I love the pacing. Would that be your fix?
Yeah. Yep. Just a little bit more connective tissue to let the scene, the three kind of pieces of that film feel more organic for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing I really thought about it was just, I kind of want more areas of doubt where he did fail, where maybe things that usually with these scientists, they're not hitting home runs on everything they do, right? They're not 3 for 3, you know. There's areas where they're completely wrong on their theories, and I'd like to know a few of those that would present greater doubt, and that would make him, you know, the stakes a little bit higher, and when he is right, feel like more of a celebration. So, one hot take, Petrified Forest.
This is our best dialogue we've seen.
Oh, that is a hot take.
Yeah,
that's a hot take.
I really liked when Betty Davis and Leslie Howard were going back and forth. I think that it's it's a hot take probably overall, but for me, it really feels like that because it feels like it's actually thought about in the writing. So.
Yeah, I'm going to go to our analytics board here real quick. Will, I'll share this with you. I have not done this yet. It's a list of all the movies that we've done. It's our movie catalog. It's got, I'm just going to do a quick scroll. Here's some of the contenders. You tell me dialogue. So we're in 1936. You get no dialogue from Modern Times. That is a silent film. What about The Thin Man?
Ooh, that's good. That might be the one that you could say, yeah.
And the only other one I was going to present was It Happened One Night. I think The Thin Man would be in that category. I like that one just because those two, William Powell and Myrna Loy, were just so good that they go on to have basically an entire franchise run here. So, but I like the take. It's a hot take for a reason, right? You're supposed to not agree with it completely. We've talked about mine. I thought that this was just one big therapy session inside that diner. So, what about the story of Louis Pasteur?
I just said that we kind of talked it through already, but it's more prescient now than it was then, this film. So if it were to be remade, I think that would be kind of interesting.
Okay. I'm on board with that. You know who else would be a very interesting, I said Jake Gyllenhaal. What about Rami Malek?
Ooh. Yeah, that'd be good. I just see him so specifically as like,
I see him like neurotic.
Yeah. He would work as a scientist for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure of this character.
Okay. Fair enough. Will, you're going to tell us what we're getting ready to watch coming up. Just want to hit you with our quick movie catalog numbers. Charlie Chaplin and Frank Capra and Alfred Hitchcock and Joseph von Sternberg. Those 4 directors, Will, are our most watched directors so far with 3 movies apiece. Gary Cooper and Clark Gable are our most watched actors at 4 movies apiece. And Claudette Colbert, Miriam Hopkins, and Marlene Dietrich are our most watched female actresses at 3 movies apiece. So just something fun to keep us up to date where we're at. Will, what is on the docket? What are we going to watch, man? What's next?
Yeah, so next we are kind of doing a little international director series. So the first one we'll watch is Fury by Fritz Lang, starring Spencer Tracy and Sylvia Sidney. When a wrongly accused prisoner barely survives a lynch mob attack and is presumed dead, he vindictively decides to fake his death and frame the mob for his supposed murder.
I'm excited about that one.
This one sounds very good. And then our second movie is another movie with a man's name in it, The Crimes of Monsieur Lange, or Lang, or however you'd want to say that, directed by Jean Renoir, starring Renee Lefebvre and Florel. So we've got our first...
Not Pharrell.
Yeah, so we've got our first one-name actor here, or actress, I'm assuming. The boss of a publishing company is a womanizer and a jerk, but what would happen if he suddenly disappeared? So, yeah, I think 2 movies that maybe thematically might be a little different. It sounds like one's going to be a little more crime-driven than the other, but it'll be fun to see 2 international directors.
And one that we already know and love. So hot diggity dog, Will, I am on board for it, my friend. Everybody, you know where to follow us. Catch us on all the socials. Email us if you'd like. And most importantly, keep watching movies. And we'll see you on down the road.
All right. See you.